theaters of New York City, so to be playing here in such a big room and have this turnout, I mean, Sadie had nothing to do with the selling out as long as Sorry, Sadie.
Well, so much has obviously been made of Brendan Fraser's incredible performance. I think we should get a round of applause for what he did in this movie. But this film is also so much an ensemble film, and the performances across the board match him immeasurably. And of course, we have Sadie Sink to thank in large part for that. What is like the key ingredient that you look for in an actor that's willing to go to the lengths that they have to go to work with you?
Well, if you talk about the lens of the wanting to cry and scream and, you know, have really work for it. So the roles that I get excited about are roles that really kind of explode with emotion and feeling and are really different. And I think the actors who are attracted to that are the ones that are hungry.
Would you describe yourself as a hungry actress?
Sure. Yeah, I think for this role, I really don't have that much experience in film. I've come from TV, of course, but I had never played a character this complex. And so when we did that cold reading of it about a year before production started, I don't know, I just left that feeling like, oh, I have to do this. I have to. I felt like it would be a real opportunity to just kind of grow as an actress, and roles like this don't often come along, especially for someone my age. So I was just really grateful that he thought of me.
Are you a director-driven performer? A lot of actors, you know, are enticed to work on projects based on the filmmaker attached. And was this one of them for you, if you were, or was that not really the case?
I mean, I think I come as prepared as possible, but I always appreciate a really hands-on director, because you're steering the ship, but you need I love guidance, and especially for this and for a character like this where each scene it's just this one giant arc and the vulnerability is just slowly seeping through. I think it was really important to have someone who's just able to kind of track that with you.
Well, about that vulnerability that you brought up, Darren, how do you create and foster a really safe environment for your actors on set? You know, to get into, I don't know, what they had to get into in order to get to their performances.
Well, we spend a lot of time before the film ever starts just talking about the character, so everyone kind of understands what's going to be needed. And then it's not very intense on set. It's intense in bursts. But as soon as we call cut, I guess there's not that many jokes because we shot this during the height of COVID. So everyone was in a mask and kind of people just kind of kept their heads down a little bit. It was a little weird. Normally there's a lot of humor and joking around on my sets, but I guess it was they were very it was a different mood on set now. I mean, I think people were excited to be working, but everyone was wearing a mask all the time, so there was some joking, I guess, afterwards and stuff, but it was also weird because normally on films, it's a real family feeling that happens, and also this, the shooting would end and everyone would go home and be locked off in their own world. So it was more, I don't know, kind of like factory work a little bit, but the intense emotions, I think, are just for those moments between action and cut. And I think it's more actually kind of fun when we're working in the moment and making it, because we're like, oh, well, how about this, try that. And the actors, I think, are excited when there's kind of new ideas thrown in.
Sadie, you say some pretty horrible things to Brendan's character over the course of the film, and I know it's obviously a written screenplay and it's all in the character work, but just as a person yourself, did you ever feel bad about hurling some of these insults at this man who you no doubt admire quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I got over that, which sounds awful, but we had 3 weeks of rehearsal, so weirdly just got comfortable with the dialogue, and for Ellie, everything's justified in her mind. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, then no, it's not difficult at all. But yeah, looking back, it's like, oh, that was harsh at moments.
Well, you mentioned briefly how you mostly dabbled in television prior to making this film, and working with a director like Darren on one of your first major features is quite the experience, I imagine. And how did it, I don't know, kind of transform the way that you want to go about your career going forward and the types of roles that you want to take on?
I mean, I think I've just learned the importance of working with filmmakers that you really trust, and that's probably the main thing that I'm really excited to look for as I kind of go forward and move on. Yeah, and then also, it's the role, not move on, but yeah, the role can be right, but I think I've really learned the value in just surrounding yourself with the right creatives attached.
You talked about a rehearsal process. Is that typical for a film of yours, or did this one just call for it given the confined setting and the small cast?
I try to do it every time, but this film, it was super important because it was a super low budget movie, and we couldn't really have blocked. I made all the blocking decisions for it. If you remember, the whole thing takes place in one room, and I'm hoping you kind of weren't limited by that experience, and I think that's because the actors are always doing something interesting, and that just took a lot of time, where we basically saw Brendan very much as like the center of the solar system, and all the other actors were planets and satellites circling him, and how they moved around. We just tried to keep being inventive and how they moved around. That invention was based on hopefully telling the story in a better way. So, I mean, one of our favorite one was when you first are taunting him and walking behind him, and he's like struggling to turn. We knew that would set up how much of an asshole you were, and how limited his movement was. So it killed two birds with one stone.
So this film was really born in New York, because New York is where you first saw the off-Broadway play, which this film is based on. Yeah, Playwrights Horizon. Well, can you take us back to watching it for the first time, and when you knew it was something that you wanted to tackle?
It was literally playing 10 years ago in this month, and I was there. And I had just never seen anything like that ever in entertainment. I had never seen characters like this. They weren't nothing like me, yet within 5 minutes I got more and more invested, and by the end of it I was deeply moved. And I think that's the power of movies and cinema, is that you can find characters all over the planet that you don't really relate to and be brought into their world. And so the opportunity to bring Charlie to the universe and let people go, wow, that's a very complicated character, and I've never met anyone like that, but it changes the way I look at people.
I'd love to open it up to the audience.
Great.
I'm sure there's a lot of people with questions. Yeah, let's start right here.
I just, my attention was grabbed earlier when you talked about it being filmed during COVID. And one thing that struck out to me, and also a theme of this movie, is honesty. And there's a very big difference between an actor crying and seeing devastation in their eyes. And I don't know, I was wondering if being filmed during COVID, did that have any sort of impact on the mood of the film and on the, process of which you went about and saw the story, since it was such an uncertain time, and time filled with hate, time filled with love, time filled with dishonesty, time filled with honesty, and if that really propelled it in any way.
I think from an acting perspective, because it was shot February of 2021, so this was before the vaccine was that accessible, and because of that, the COVID precautions are very much still in place, and it was pretty isolating. And we were filming in Newburgh, New York, which there's not a lot going on there. So most of the time, I'd be interacting with a human being would be on set, and that interaction was usually limited to the scene. So I think it kind of focused us all, and also that just feeling of isolation, that feeling of loneliness. I think you see that a lot in the film. And with Ellie, she's a very like lonely person, so I think it definitely got us all in the right mindset.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the film actually resonates more post-COVID than it did even before, because we all kind of lived Charlie's life to some form. So I think it's bringing up weird things in a lot of different people's different ways. It probably makes Charlie's story a little bit more accessible.
I cried a lot more at the end of that movie than I thought I was going to.
Wonderful. I'm starting a hashtag cry together. Yeah, cry together.
My question is, he talks about the obliteration of self in terms of the Whitman poem, but I was thinking of Death is the Road to Awe from The Fountain, and sort of those endings, like, why do you go there and how do you go there?
It's true. Look, Mark Kanan, who wrote Black Swan, wrote me a letter after he saw this, and he was like all your films, character dies at the end. But this one's different, because he actually gives something to someone else. Most of the other characters kind of have a selfish end, it's a personal end, right? This one actually is giving back, so I think I'm evolving a little bit.
Somewhat similar, but I feel like throughout the films you made, you depict quite a few characters who suffer from sort of their own self-destructiveness and sort of helplessness towards that. What drives you to put stories like that to screen?
Who's paying who for this? The shrink is here. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not really sure. I don't know what drives or what I'm attracted to in these characters. I just find the stories really kind of engaging, and I felt that Charlie was very different because he was giving back so much. So I don't know. I don't really have an answer except that all of these films that I do, they kind of just they feel right somewhere, and then I just sort of tell that story. So I don't know if it's fully conscious what's going on and why I'm telling the stories. It's just kind of more like what is inspiring.
So the character of Ellie seems to be someone that is kind of like playing both sides of like, oh, I really want to be alone, but also I kind of want to help people. So I was wondering how, like, when you throughout the performance, did you go back and forth between those types of ideas, or was it like slowly moving over towards the end?
I mean, I always just kind of pictured this like armor, and it's something that she's built up over the years as a way to just like deflect her pain or these hard emotions that she's never been allowed the space to really unpack. And her week that she spends with Charlie, he's able to see her clearly and in a way that no one has ever given her that attention before, in a way no one's ever seen her. So every time he's saying something like, you're amazing, you're intelligent, you're beautiful, you're a strong writer, she doesn't know how to take it. She's never received that before, so it cracks a little bit, and that's when a little bit of vulnerability seeps through. And when that seeps through, that makes her really angry. And she's got to do everything she can to mend it up. And usually the way that she gets control, the way that she gets power over a situation is through violence, violent words, sometimes violent actions. Like her first scene, when she's seen her dad for the first time in 10 years, he makes her feel really confused at the end of that interaction because he's not who she thought that he was for all of these years. And in order to like get control over him, she's like, let me ask him to stand up and do something that I know that he can't do. Let me leave this situation feeling like I'm on top, I'm in control. And it's twisted, but that's what she knows.
I actually have a question for both Darren and Sadie. First off, that was incredible. I'm having a hard time composing myself right now. First, what made you decide to shoot this in a 4:3 aspect ratio? And Sadie, if you don't want to say, I totally understand. I'm just curious. Do you think Ellie was trying to help the missionary, or do you think that was
I feel nervous.
It kept me up at night because I didn't know. I have my theory, but I think it's up to you to decide, kind of.
I shot in 4:3. He's talking about that'll look more square than most movies, because well, I like big widescreen makes sense if it's shot out in a desert or in great wilderness. But all apologies to the production designers, but it's just an apartment, and also because of the emotions, it's really about the actors. And if you think about this shape, that square, it's more like the shape of your head than a rectangle. So it was about performance, it was about the words. So that's what I love about it.
I think we have time for two more.
Great.
All right, up there.
I just want to thank you for telling this story about a version of addiction or condition of the humanness. I split myself in half, so I understand it. I know that there's a lot of chatter about what Brendan did to get where he was, but it was 1,000% necessary to see him like that, to understand that that was part of his fabric. And so whatever somebody tells you, done right.
I mean, if they see the film, it's kind of obvious. That's what it's just strange that it's just well, the planet's kind of everyone's got to have a point these days.
Okay.
Go back. Sure.
Yeah, and one more.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
it's so nice to meet you both. I love the film. I'm falling apart, clearly. I'm shaking. I'm doing things both of you. I'm just thinking, I'm so sorry. In terms of, how, I'm so sorry.
No, thank you, Tom. It's good.
So moving. I've worked with elderly citizens, so that work was very personal to me. In terms of understanding how a character like Charlie, who is in a way disabled, overweight, obese, I saw it while the credits were rolling. You were working with
The OAC.
Yes, thank you. I just want to know what work you specifically did with that organization that really struck light with you both, and you also, Darren, and also how Charlie's character, he's very submissive. A lot of people equate submissiveness to sort of they don't want to be the light as big as they are. Having a spotlight on them is a lot to handle. So I want to know how that kind of influenced the character.
Yeah. Sam Hunter, the writer, talks about that because he kind of lived the experience of that, and so he was able to really bring that to Charlie's character, and that was always something that really moved me. How much he said sorry, how that was part of his language, just not wanting to be there even though he was there. The OAC is the Obesity Action Coalition, and they are a great organization that kind of is a voice for people living with obesity. And we got them involved because we knew there would be many sensitivities, and we just wanted to see where we might be running into insensitivities. And so they came in on the script, at the script level, and then when Brendan came on, they connected him with people who have lived with obesity or were living with obesity, and he was able to ask them many questions that gave him a lot of the insight about how people kind of have gone down this path. One thing Brendan always talks about is most of them all had a story about somehow being deeply offended by a parent figure, often a father, that kind of insulted them in a way organization, and kind of the most amazing thing was they saw it when we finished it, and getting their response to it was just like, I wish the whole world, all these people that are saying that this film shouldn't exist, they're so happy and thrilled about that it's out in the world because it's changing people's minds about, after the premiere, a group of doctors that I had invited came up to me and they were like, we're guilty of, we understand that we judge people living with obesity and we don't give them the same medical care we should, but seeing this film and meeting Charlie and understanding Charlie actually changed them. So that's an exciting thing for people and it's good for everyone because it is a prejudice that is still out in the world. And it's not like we're condoning it or any of that, it's just that, just remember they're people. You know, that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Darren, do you want to choose the last one?
Yeah, sure. Something like that. Like the first back with yeah, you. Yep, with your Oscilla. No, not with the light. Sorry, with the red shirt. Sorry. The technology likes Darren.
Great, thank you. And if the play was written at least 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I'm curious about the choice to place it in a very specific time, and then that specific time, which wasn't in
2016.
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't set it in the present day because Liz, being a healthcare worker, would definitely be wearing a mask, and everyone would be wearing a mask. Or that when she was in a scene, everyone would be wearing a mask. So, you know, that would just kill. It would be very hard to get a performance. So we started to think about when, and Sam was attracted to 2016 because for many of us, it was sort of like the world was about to change. It was also kind of the last normal that kind of existed. And then we were shooting in February, March, and so okay, we were like 2016, what happened in February, March? And I was like, oh, it's Super Tuesday, which is kind of this really interesting moment in time. So it really doesn't, I'm not trying to make a political comment or anything, it's just kind of a really interesting moment to remind us all that we all lived through. And these are characters living in Idaho who went through it. So that was the main reason.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
And if you like